Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to a special edition of Popcorn and Compliance. As you know from prior episodes, Megan Dougherty, co-founder of One Stone Creative, and I are huge MCU fans. So we've decided to do the MCU movie oeuvre. That's right. We're going to do all of the MCU movies in this special podcast series. Over this series, we will take a look at the storylines, some of the cookies and other cool things. We'll describe the great action scenes from each episode, and then we'll take a look at issues raised by each episode. It's going to be a lot of fun. We will take things from the societal angle, from the social justice angle, from the MCU angle, and perhaps even from the compliance angle. But if you're an MCU fan or you're a compliance fan, I know you will enjoy. In this episode, we take up Tom's favorite MCU movie, The Avengers. This podcast is a special production of the Compliance Podcast Network. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, backing in with Megan Dougherty with our continuing challenge of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We're going through the entire MCU on popcorn and compliance. Why? Well, we're both MCU uber geeks, and of course it's there. Plus, it gives us an excuse to watch these movies. So if you are an MCU geek and you want to be joining us for a fun podcast, nothing too serious, let us know. We have guests from time to time. So we're going to continue our exploration of the MCU in chronological order of the MCU timeline, not by release date. And today it is The Avengers. I don't know how much you can say about the Avengers, or perhaps I'm not sure you could ever say enough about the Avengers, from the fact that it was in 2012 the greatest or the highest grossing movie ever at 1.5 billion, now exceeded, to the scope of it, to having the whole gang together, to having some of the greatest action sequences ever done on CGI. I don't know, how you could go too big when you talk about it. As big as Endgame and Infinity Wars were. I'm not sure, for me, Megan, anything will ever top that first Avengers. Just kind of, could you give me how you felt about it when you first saw it? Was it just overwhelming? Was it just so big? Was it just wow, 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 wow? What was it for you?
It was definitely closest to wow, 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 because it was all happening in a condensed fashion when I was getting into it. But that's enough movies into the universe that you kind of know everyone. You at least have a bit of a flavor of all of the different main characters, and seeing them get together is really satisfying. And I think the way they went from individual stars into a cohesive unit over the course of the movie was really good storytelling. Too, and the way it happened was really narratively and emotionally satisfying. There's some really great explosions and great fight scenes, and I love those. So let's talk about a little. What were some of your favorite plot points from the Avengers, the first Avengers?
When we were getting ready to record this, I told you I'm not sure we have enough time because just on the plot points alone, I loved so many of them, from kind of the opening scenes, but where they were working on the Tesseract box when the box got stolen, when Loki was the one that stole it. He hypnotized Hawkeye. They made the fabulous escape to the moving to New York, where or rather not to New York, but to the aircraft carrier in the sky. The scenes in there where they capture Loki and they put him in the cage, and he's going to do something to talk his way out, and surely he does. Then when we have the Avengers finally get together, and some of the sharpest screenwriting I have ever seen in the wit repartee between Iron Man, Tony Stark, Captain America, the Hulk, Dr. Banner, even Loki, Hawkeye, not Hawkeye, but Natasha, the Black Widow, it was just fabulous to see that. And of course, when you had Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, kind of herding cats, if not running the circus, I'm not sure which. All of that was just fabulous. We had Phil Coulson, of course, Agent Phil, and then the fight scenes on the ship, the battle scenes, the part where Captain America and Iron Man worked to restart the rotor, I thought was as good an action scene as really any of them. And that's before we even get to New York. Then we get to New York, and Tony Stark has the penthouse suite of penthouse suites. Frank Sinatra got nothing on this guy. And it's got every cool toy. You know, it's got Jarvis, it's got Pepper, it's got its own landing pad. Oh man. So like 60s bachelor pad, that's all I could see there. That was the Frank Sinatra reference. And just a bar to end all bars. And then of course we have Loki arrive with his army, and we have a big battle in New York. We have the group of generals decide they're going to nuke New York to save the world. We have Iron Man stop the nuke and redirect it at Loki's army, which destroys them. There's a very memorable fight and battle scene that the Avengers engage in just outside of Grand Central Station. It's a famous overhead drive in Grand Central, and they show that. Lots of New York scenes that they show. You can watch it and watch it and watch it and never grow tired of it. So that's kind of an unintended quick plot summary. But I've just scratched the surface. I was trying to think back to if I had a favorite part. And even though I just laid out that whole fabulous summary, actually my favorite part may have been when Natasha, as the Black Widow, goes to get the Hulk in India. And there was so much touching, not tension in a negative way, but really positive tension between the two. And it's clear there's an affinity between the two, and that she does really feel there's some electricity and chemistry between the two that we explore later. But you see just the stark dynamics that Bruce Banner is feeling as the Hulk at that point. He doesn't know how to control himself. He's tried to shut himself off from humanity, and we're about to find out that doesn't work. And they send Natasha to get him. And they send Natasha with an army of assassins, and it's lucky for the army of assassins that he decides to go with her rather peaceably and peacefully. And there's just so many smaller scenes like that I found very touching. Hawkeye's family, was one that I thought was touching on almost, I don't want to say out of place, but certainly not action oriented. So I've rambled on long enough. Why is this movie so special for you?
Well, it's certainly special to me. I think it doesn't have quite the shining beacon of a place in mine as it does in yours, but I do like it. I love the individual introductions or the reintroductions of each character. I really, really enjoy. And kind of each of their journey through the movie into getting to the point where they are on the floating aircraft carrier in the sky. So for Natasha, it was, being in that interrogation when Phil calls to say, oh, Barton's been compromised. And she's just like, pardon me, let me deal with this very quickly and efficiently. Hilarious. So good. You've got the Russian gangsters. Like, I wasn't giving everything away. Yeah. So great there. I think, some fan service, but who doesn't want fan service? I just want to see them all looking fantastic and doing their best. And then when she collects Hulk, that's fantastic. everyone, it started to kind of, I think, really come together when Loki was in at that gala event, stealing the eyeball from whoever it was that had security access, and he was, everybody kneel, everybody down on your knees. Well, what better way to bring back Captain America, who hates nothing more than Nazis? So, way to build an enemy for life there, Loki. Good job. But great scene. And then when they all get together and the way they spat with each other, because they are so individuals, none of them is comfortable with teamwork on any level. So just seeing them all fight each other and then realize, hey, they're on the good side, but the good side is very, very gray area in terms of what it's doing, what it's building, and what its goals are. So that kind of brings us to the sacrifice of Phil Coulson, which is one of a really heartfelt and crushing moment, but leads to one of the best form-up movie moments and kind of getting ready montages of all time. So those were some of my favorite parts. And of course, anytime you're blowing up a big city is going to be one of my favorite parts of a movie, because that's just what I go to movies for. So the Battle of New York was iconic.
So let me pick up on the scene with Natasha as Black Widow. And the opening scene is she is tied to a chair. There's 4 or 5 very nasty Russians about to do something to her. It's not clear.
Rip out her teeth.
Yeah, it's not clear what, or even perhaps at that point why. But one of their phone rings, and they answer the phone, and it turns out, well, it's for Natasha. And it's Nick Fury saying, hey, we need you. And to which she says, I'm in the middle of an interrogation. And at that point, that answer is plausible because she is tied up to a chair and they're about to ask her some questions. And then she says, and I'm about to get out of what I need. And you realize something very different. Give me a few minutes. And she hangs up.
Let me put you on hold. And then it's Coulson on the other end, just kind of waiting as if he's on hold to the sounds of like a thrashing to end all thrashings. Oh, so good.
That was so great. Yeah, I'm in the middle of an interrogation. I mean, you're absolutely right. The fight scenes in New York, they built upon those in later shows that I thought in a great way. But all of that was just fabulous. There were some fabulous cookies that I wanted to bring up, and some they weren't obscure to me, but even for I think MCU fans, they may have been a little obscure. And one was Build-A-Bear. So I don't know if you have nieces or nephews, but I had a daughter, and we lived at Build-A-Bear, and she loved Build-A-Bear. Dad loved to take her to Build-A-Bear. So we did lots of Build-A-Bears. There was also a reference to the Blue Meanies. And the Blue Meanies were in the movie version of the Beatles' Yellow Submarine. So that's where the Blue Meanies came from. And
okay, that explains something for me. Thank you for that.
So those,
I didn't catch that at all.
Those were two of the cooler cookies that I had. One, which is a little darker, was that at one point Thor throws a hammer axe, and I can't remember who he threw it at. I think at a Mad Titan, and he said, "You need to aim for the head." Well, that presages when Thor tries to kill Thanos in Infinity War, but fails to do so. Thanos reminds him of that. And then in Endgame, when he does meet up with Thanos, he brooks nothing and chops his head off literally with one swoop of an axe out of the blue. So I thought that was a little bit darker. But what were some of the Easter eggs or cookies that resonated with you, Megan?
I had more just moments that I thought were hilarious writing and really, really great for that. And then I realized it was Joss Whedon who wrote and contributed to a lot of those. So, okay, that makes sense. And for all that's going on in Joss Whedon's world, he does write great, witty dialogue. So Loki being described as a full-tilt diva by Tony Stark was one of my favorite moments. And I think that because that was just so accurate to how Loki was behaving. And that made me think of when he was in the prison on the floating base, And Coulson told him he lacked conviction. And that was so interesting because he really did lack conviction. He's doing what he thinks he should to get what he thinks he wants as a villain. And he's dead wrong. Because what he really wants is, to be loved. So I thought that was really, really nice. And then another one I had was Harry Dean Stanton as the security guard who was guarding the building the Hulk fell into. That was great.
Yeah.
He's wonderful.
He is.
Yeah, and again, other writings like, when Captain America and Captain Stark are trying to fix the turbine. So it does seem to run on some kind of electricity. Definitely. Some kind of, so good. And really, really good at setting up how the characters are so different from each other. When, very soon they're actually going to be using all of these different skills to work together in a beautiful lesson on friendship and teamwork.
There was a couple of others I wanted to raise. Once again, outside the MCU universe. One is there's a Ben and Jerry reference with, to a hunka chunk of Hulk ice cream.
They bring that back in Infinity War too, exactly. I think, don't they?
And then there's also a reference to the Big Lebowski, where he calls him Dude, which is a name for the Big Lebowski. So
the dude abides.
The dude abides. And then finally, there's one that harkens back to an earlier episode or movie in the MCU universe. And I think it was when I referenced the scene in front of Grand Central Station when they're fighting what appears to be unyielding odds. And Captain America says, "I can do this all day." And we heard that line in Captain America when he was Steve Rogers getting the tar beaten out of him in Brooklyn. And that was his line, "I can do this all day." So I thought that was a pretty cool line because it was a pretty cool line when he said it when he was a much smaller and younger chap in the 40s. So, for me, Megan, I've talked about how big this movie was, and it's still big. They get bigger, but this was the first big one for me. And I still think back to either however we look at them, the chronology or release date. This was one of the seminal ones for me because it was so big, because it brought everybody together, because it just seemed to hit on every cylinder, every actor, everybody was on their A game. And I don't want to say that it made the others lessers because it didn't. It just, to this day, it stands out to me as one of the top ones, simply because it brought all that together for the first time. As I said, even though they do get bigger and better, but I still think of this one as really one of the seminal ones for me. Obviously, its worldwide gross, I think, bears that out for a lot of us as well. What maybe are some final thoughts you might have on what it meant, either then, now, or how your thinking on it may have evolved now that you've seen, gone back and seen other movies in the MCU?
Well, I think kind of what you're saying here, it brings kind of one of my, let's call it a media-related regret in my life. So, certainly not huge potatoes in the grand scheme of things, but I do regret that I didn't see these movies as they came out because what an experience it must have been to go to the theater and see that movie with these characters together the first time. Same for Infinity War, for Endgame. That's an experience I wish I had when it was happening, and just being with other people experiencing that, I think would, because there are people out there, movie snobs, who like the Criterion Collection and won't watch anything made after 1960. But these movies, they tell a really important story about power and relationships with people and responsibility and things being greater than the sum of their parts. And I think that they really stand up. Like, these movies stand up as important pieces of thought for what we should do and maybe how we can think about things and how we can relate to each other. So there's my little philosophical take on it. But I think these are really valuable media, in the costume of superhero movies.
We're going to have a quick word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back. That's really interesting. First, let me give you interesting point one is I really never liked these movies when I saw them in the theater.
Oh, interesting.
I was too overwhelmed. It was too big. It was too loud. It was too much going on. Sometimes I couldn't follow the names. I had to think back, okay, where did that come from? But when I got them on DVD and could sit and watch them and watch the chronology of the MCU, that's when I really fell in love with a much deeper appreciation and understanding. And to your point about the lessons, I'm a Criterion snob. And, subscribe to the Criterion Collection. And if you don't know what that is, well, we didn't want you in our club anyway. But good storytelling always resonates. And I remember when the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies came out, I had this conversation with my aunt. And the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies were based on 60s comic book stories. And we talked about if it was a great comic book in the 60s and it lasted 40 years, it must be great storytelling. And that's what made the movie so great. Well, these MCU movies are grounded in, not specifically based, but in large part grounded in the Marvel comic books. And they were great stories. And they made great storytelling in the comic book form. And they've made great storytelling in the movie form. And to your point, they are great stories. And they do have important points that were communicated to 8-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 18-year-olds in comic books, and the same age groups, plus a whole lot more in movies. So I think you're absolutely spot on that, yeah, I can be a Criterion snob and say, well, if it's not French New Wave, I'm not interested. But the reality is, if you can put good elements of a story together, you can communicate an important message, and you hit on all of those. So that's really a great observation that just because it ain't Criterion doesn't mean it's not a great story.
Yeah, I mean, hey, why not both, right? You can like everything. We are vast and contain multitudes.
Exactly.
And there's lots of room for superhero stories.
So I guess anyone listening to this podcast is going to figure out we both love this movie. So,
well, spoilers.
Spoiler alert. But we got lots more to go. So I hope you all will join us for our next episode, because we're going to take up Iron Man 3, which was one of those when I originally saw it. I was not too keen on it, but then so Megan, during the first 6 months of the pandemic, my wife and I sat down and did the whole MCU. So then I had a complete reappraisal of Iron Man 3, and then getting ready for our next podcast, I've been thinking about it, getting ready to rewatch it. So I'm going to be greatly interested in what your thoughts might be, and I look forward to continuing this.
I can't wait. Until next time.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of Popcorn and Compliance, the MCU series. Hope you will join Megan and I again for our next episode where we take up the Avengers. Also, I'd like to tell you about a special podcast series that recently premiered on the Compliance Podcast Network, Trial of the Century, the Enron Trial, where with business journalist Lauren Steffi, who covered the Enron trial, we take a look at the trial of Enron as opposed to the bankruptcy. I know you'll enjoy it if you like fraud, if you like trials, or you just like a good story. Check it out on the Compliance Podcast Network.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.